Hey everyone, you're listening to Fantasy Uptick. I'm Jeremiah Blue, and today we're going to be talking about a late round wide receiver that I think needs to be on everybody's radar. And with that, let's just jump right in. The guy I want to talk about today is DeSean Jackson. And if we look at what DeSean Jackson was last year, in the one game sample size that we got, he had 9 targets, 8 receptions, 154 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, and he played 69% of the snaps. Now, obviously, I'm not projecting that long-term over 16-game span. He would be like the number 1 pick if I was doing that. But it shows us that in this offense, he's still capable of doing a lot of really good things. Last year, though he was injured, he was healthy for the very last game in the playoffs. He was going to be available for the next game. So what that tells us is he was already getting to that healthy state. So this whole offseason, he's essentially been healthy. And he's already said he's 100% healthy, which, again, that's just stuff you're going to say in the media. But I mean, I believe it because he was going to play, right? And if we look at what this team was last year, a lot of people forget just how banged up the Philadelphia Eagles were all year last year. DeSean Jackson was essentially their only real deep threat. And when he went down, this offense just could not create spacing. And still, Carson Wentz balled out. He threw for 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, and not one wide receiver had over 500 yards receiving. I don't know that that's ever happened in the history of football, to be honest with you. And tell me in the comments if there's a guy that did that in the past, and I'm not thinking of him. Obviously, Wentz had a good year. Dallas Goedert had a good year, and so did Miles Sanders, who was catching passes out of the backfield. But no receivers were any good. Nelson Aguilar was basically their only healthy receiver, and they really had to lean on him, right? Going into this year, I think this is the best set of weapons that Carson Wentz has ever had. So I think his production is going to be a lot closer to the 2017 Carson Wentz that was on pace for the MVP race, when he was on pace for 4,400 yards, 40 touchdowns, and it was the season that obviously he went down. Nick Foles went on to win the Super Bowl, and that's history, right? So the next year he was banged up again, and then 2019, while he wasn't banged up, everybody around him was banged up, so he really hasn't had a chance to get back to that form. And all year he had a healthy season last year. The offensive line's still great. These are the best set of running back, or this is the best running back he's ever had. And these are the best receivers that he's ever had around him. Now, Alshon Jeffrey, his injury issue is obviously questioned. And there's even been rumors that they might cut him, which at this point they could. They wouldn't lose any money, but they wouldn't gain any cap space either. They're going to end up cutting him next year for sure because his contract's just too expensive. So, but this year, they still might cut him this year, take the hit this year, and then again, they're not losing anything next year because they were going to cut him regardless next season. It really just depends on if guys like Marquise Goodwin and Whiteside and Rieger seem to take that mantle where they're going to be the best 4 receivers. And then maybe there's another guy that they want to put on the 53-man roster just because they feel like they could have a role. But again, I think Jeffrey ends up staying. He really might start off on the PUP list. And the only person of this Philadelphia Eagles wide receiving group that I feel comfortable with is DeSean Jackson, who's currently healthy. And I know what role he's going to play on this offense. Yes, DeSean Jackson is a boom or bust player, but he's still got the boom in him. And with a lot of draft strategies that I'll be talking about this year, it's going to be going after running backs early. And I'm not even opposed to going after a Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson early because I think that they're so safe at the quarterback position. I know how deep the quarterback position is, but it's still the most important role on your roster because, again, it provides the most points. So if you get a Mahomes and he outscores every other quarterback in the league minus the, Lamar Jackson by 40 points at the end of the year, you equate that over, you had an advantage every single week. Whereas a guy like the DeSean Jackson, I think that I can get him so late, and I do think he can start. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to reach for quarterback in every single draft, but I'm saying you need guys at the end of your drafts that you feel comfortable drafting that could go into your starting lineup if you're leaning heavy towards running back. Because I'm even drafting backup running backs before I even fill up my whole roster in certain mock drafts because the running backs, they fall off of a cliff. And especially in these deeper leagues, which a lot of people listening to me right now are in like 14, 16 team leagues, Well, you need those running backs, which means you're passing on good receivers throughout this draft. You need a guy at the end of the draft that you feel comfortable throwing in and that could give you a big game like this, that could help you win a championship, that help you pull an upset in these dynasty leagues where your team's not that good and you're playing against the guy that's he's just basically stacked. I mean, I know everybody knows the dynasty leagues where there's a team in that league that you're just like, I don't even know why I'm playing this year. His team's stacked. Well, you get a guy like DeSean Jackson that can have a game where he puts up 154 yards, 2 touchdowns when you play that dude. Again, he is an asset, and in those dynasty leagues, he's so cheap right now because he's so old, right? But in redraft leagues, I think there is going to be one receiver that really blows up for the Philadelphia Eagles this year. Probably going to finish second behind Ertz in targets and yards, but I think that receiver is going to end up being DeSean Jackson. And honestly, DeSean Jackson playing 16 games, he could finish above Ertz in yards. Maybe not in targets. Again, this is not a target guy. This is not a guy that I would probably target in PPR formats, but in standard formats, again, he has these monster games where he's getting touchdowns and stuff like that. So I could see him getting about 100 targets, well over 1,000 yards, and about 8 to 10 touchdowns, and you're getting him for the last pick of your draft. And if you compare him to guys on their own roster like Jalen Reagor is going to go get drafted over him. And again, this is more like, I like the Philadelphia Eagle roster. So I don't hate Jalen Reagor. I'd actually like to get Reagor and DeSean Jackson on the same roster because I believe one of them is going to be really good, right? I think that person is DeSean Jackson. If I can only get one for 1 year, I would rather have DeSean Jackson. But I can see a case for Jalen Reagor as well, especially if Alshon Jeffrey starts off on the PUP list, because I think that they're going to be playing together at the same time. And I think that the way the Eagles are built is it's just going to kind of be tough to cover 2 guys that can stretch the field. I mean, if we look at what they were doing last year, they ran 12 personnel 54% of the time. You got your 2 tight ends, which that's what 12 personnel is, basically 2 tight ends, 1 running back. And I think this year they're going to probably move a little bit to that 11 personnel. I think Reagor ends up playing the slot, but DeSean Jackson's going to have a role. Anytime DeSean Jackson can be on the field, he's going to be on the field. And what I mean by that is, since he runs a lot of fly routes, they usually take him off the field. After the fly route, he'll come back and he'll get right back on the field after one play, because that's the kind of player that he is. So he's never going to be that guy that's on the field 90% of the time, but I think that he can have a monster year, standard format, and I think he's going to be a steal at the end of the drafts for some people, especially if he can play 16 games. If he plays 16 games, he's going to be a ridiculous value. And at the end of my draft, with that much draft stock, that's the kind of guy I'm going after. A guy that is down this far because of injury, but if he were to stay healthy all year, could have a big year. Think John Brown from last year. He fell in a lot of drafts because he had that huge injury history, and then he was able to stay healthy for basically the whole season, and then he had that monster year, or like draft value wise, he had a big year. And I think that could be DeSean Jackson this year. So that's it for today's show. Let me know what you think. Do you think DeSean Jackson could have a monster year if he stays healthy for 16 games? Or do you think there's just no way DeSean Jackson can stay healthy for 16 games and you're just not staying away from this guy no matter what? Let me know in the comments. Again, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Until next time, see ya!